when you were a kid, did you have any siblings?
So I do. I have a sibling who is about 5 years older than I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously every kid gets a different parent, right? Depending on what's going on in their families. Were they more like go out, push you out there, go out there, figure stuff out, like find, just go and find out, or were they the type like, nah, just whatever you need, here, like you have to kind of like be dependent on me,
right?
Like I would say like we're not training our kids to like suck on their tit for like the rest of their lives.
So I'll tell you, man, my parents were. It's a very unique history that they had, right? And just to give context to explain kind of their methodology, what they used, raising me as a child. So my dad, born and raised in Ybor City, came from a very humble background. He had 3 siblings, plus his mother and his father. They lived in a very, very small 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Ybor City, right off of Clark Street, right? And my grandfather was a barber by trade, and my grandmother was a stay-at-home wife to take care of the kids, right? So my mom raised in Cuba and came to Miami. From Miami, went to Tampa, and very different upbringing. My grandfather owned an empire in Cuba, right, for import, export, fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. Castro came in, took everything. They came to this country with nothing, right? So essentially had to start over. So my grandmother opened a restaurant. She was actually voted best Cuban sandwich at Tampa Bay for 10 years in a row back in the 70s. But I say all that to say, my parents met when they were about 12, 13 years old. And when they met, the first time my father, he looked across the street. My mom was moving in. They were moving to Tampa. Looks across the street and he sees my mom and he tells his mom, he goes, I'm going to marry her one day.
Woo!
And bro, sure enough, like that, and that's the beautiful thing about my parents, man. They've been together ever since, right? So they are all each other knows, right? And so they just celebrated their 48th wedding anniversary. So I say all that to say I was very blessed and I was very fortunate to have a lot of support in the house. Now, with that being said, because of my father's background, man, we had to earn every inch. Like there was, oh, you want to go to the movies? Okay, how are you going to pay for that? Dad, you going to give me money? No, you're going to go cut that grass. You're going to go knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, do you have any weeds that I can pull? Things like that, right? So at a very young age, it was, no. I'll be your father. Like, I'm going to make sure that you've got a loving home, you've got food on the table, and you're safe. But everything else that you want, you need to go earn for yourself. And I'm so, like, to this day, I'm so thankful for that, right?
That's awesome.
Because of what it instilled in me, right? Now, my mom is a Cuban mama, right? Yeah. So she's a mama bear, right? So, but she was a corporate executive, so there was a lot of things, man. Like, I am so fortunate and blessed because she encouraged me and enforced this idea of, look, your word is your bond. So when you shake someone's hand and you tell them that you're going to do something, you do it. Because if you don't, right, no one will ever trust you. And the only thing that really, truly matters in this life is trusting one human being or another, right? Or trusting each other, I should say. So that stuck with me. I was like 9 years old when she's dropping these lessons on me, right? I don't know, but now I look back retrospectively and I'm like, golly, man, I'm very, very blessed in that sense. So, but no, bro, I had to earn every inch. I mean, everything that I did along the way, there was no allowance. There was none of that. It was not, you want it, go get it.
Yeah, I didn't have that allowance thing. Yeah. That's and my kids don't have that either. Like, we don't play like that. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty interesting. I guess your dad kind of like gave you that mindset of like working and earning, mm-hmm. right? And then and your mom was giving you kind of like the principles,
absolutely,
right?
100%.
Like life principles,
yes,
and things like that. And that's how I like doing stuff, like on handshakes.
Yes.
Obviously people get greedy nowadays and stuff like that, but to be honest with you, when things like that happen, I feel good. Like if they want to walk away or take advantage or whatever, like they're not taking advantage of me because I'm still moving.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly. And that's an important thing that you just mentioned too. Like, not getting caught up on that because so many people get caught up on that. It's like, man, from an intentional perspective, look, man, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and you feel right about it, whatever happens after that, it's whatever.
Yeah. So, so you went to school here in Tampa and stuff like that. So you ended up after high school, ended up going to college. Straight to college, or you took some time off?
So at that time, I'd gotten through high school, and I was actually I started a program at the University of South Florida my junior year of high school. And the honors college there had a program called early admissions. So basically what it meant was you get disenrolled from the county school system and you become a full-time college student at USF starting your junior year of high school.
Wow.
Right? So I did that for 2 years. And then right when graduation came around for high school, they re-enroll you and they just transfer the college credits over as AP credits.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? So, because I'll tell you, bro, I was kind of, after my second year of high school, I was tapped out. I'm like, I'm kind of bored. Like, you know, and it was not heading in a good direction, right? So that's what I ended up doing. It actually worked out really well because my mother, shortly thereafter, was diagnosed with cancer, right? And so it allowed me the opportunity to take a year off of school and take care of her. So I was her primary care provider for a year when she was going through chemo, radiation, recovery from surgery, all that sort of stuff.
How old were you?
18.
18?
Yeah,
Wow.
18. So my dad at the time was working, and he obviously had to continue to work for health insurance to my mom to get her treatments. So the other option was, well, we can hire a nurse, but that's really expensive.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm like, no, man, we're not doing that. So I told him, like, I'll take a year off and I'll do it. And best thing, honestly, I ever did for me and for her and for the family in general.
Dude, I mean, 18 years old, like, you're just starting to live kind of like adulthood, right?
Yeah, man.
And you find yourself in that place at that moment, which is obviously is your mom. You got to take care of her, but at the same time, I mean, that's such a like huge life lesson, like, because it teaches you about yourself, you know, and obviously like your mom's still around,
Exactly.
you know, thanks to God, and you know, so her strength, you know, to still be around, man, to go overcome that. And
pound for pound, man, she is the most, and I have been very blessed to be around a lot of very strong people with incredible intestinal fortitude, but I have not come across anyone that rocks the way that she rocks, because she has been dealt with hit after hit after hit, and she keeps pushing through. So that's one of the biggest things, man, from a resiliency perspective that I've picked up from her. But you're right, the life lessons, I mean, to learn how fragile this life is and how quickly things can change, right? To get that lesson served on a cold plate at 18 years old, and you know, you see this woman who's just always a beaming ray of sunshine. It's just been wonderful, and to see her go through that battle, and it's, you know, you start doubting and questioning things, like, right? So I'm a Christian, right? I'm a man of faith, but then at 18, 19 years old, I see something like this happen to a woman who's like an angel, and I'm like, man, like how? Why? Like, I don't understand. Like, of all people, right? So that was a really important learning opportunity for me, and to kind of take a macro view, right, and say, there's got to be a reason, right? I don't have the tools to understand what the reason is, right? But to come to terms with it and still maintain faith, because I questioned it. I'm like, this ain't right, man. Like, this is, if that's how you work, I got some problems, right? But to have that epiphany, to have those realizations at such a young age, and those trials and tribulations, I'm very thankful for, man. That carried on with me, you know, in different points of adversity in my life, right up to this point. And I still go back to it. I mean, it's a guiding light for me, man. That experience of, I mean, dude, you know, helping her bathe, preparing her meals, you know, changing her wound dressings, like all these things, man. It's, it hits, man, at a different level.
It's kind of like reality hits you. Big and time. You're like, wow, like that's when you start understanding like life being so fragile. And that's Big why time. I always tell people, like, you have to make the most out of every day, because you never know when things are going to come up. Like my wife just went through a little scare as well, you know, and they found a little mass on her breast.
Yeah.
And when she went to the specialist, you know, the specialist was like, based on like everything that you're telling me, it sounds like it's like 85% like cancer, right? So obviously we were trying to keep it like very, very, and this has been going on in the past 2 months, right? And obviously we just got to keep moving, but we tried to stay as positive as possible, just like in the right mindset, right? And then she went back, they did a biopsy, and a day later, 2 days later, she gets the results. They told her it wasn't cancer. So, but then, you know, she still had to go to surgery to remove the mass, which just happened last week. And you know, just to make sure that nothing grows out of that, you know. Of
course, absolutely.
And but yeah, man, it's just like one of those things. Like, obviously, you want to stay as positive as you can, right? At moments, I'm pretty sure like we all have to kind of like feel weak and break down a little bit, but we got to pick ourselves back up and just keep on moving, because that's just life. And little things like that. Sometimes I feel like those are their life telling you, like, hey, dude, don't freaking waste your time.
Legit.
Like, do the things that you want to do, the things that you need to do.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people say like, oh, I'm going to do this. You only live once. Yeah, but you want to live as best as possible. You know, if you're going to be drunk every day and you don't even know what the hell's going on and you wake up 3 days later, like that's not living your best life.
Not.
You know?
No.
So this happens, you take a time off from school, then you go back to school, or?
Yeah. So I go back to school, finished up my bachelor's degree, and started my master's degree at USF. And, you know, I was bilingual at the time. And one of the things that I was doing on the side was getting into executive protection work, right? So I ended up going to an executive protection school down in Miami. And I had a big love for that, right? And I think a lot of that goes to my childhood, like this idea of being trying to be a protector, right, for my family. And that stems from, and we'll get into that, but when I was in third grade, my aunt was shot in the face in front of me, right? And so a lot psychologically, right, a lot there as far as vulnerability and not feeling like I could do anything in the situation and feeling helpless, right? So that's really what pushed me to start getting involved in martial arts, right? My parents put me in martial arts at a young age to help me boost that self-confidence and like to have a greater sense of identity and awareness. So long on the short, man, I ended up taking a job in South America. So I was still working on my master's degree.
And what were you into school for? Like it was
international relations.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the master's was international relations with a concentration on security studies. And so I actually was looking and studying guerrilla groups and guerrilla warfare in Colombia.
Wow.
So two major groups there, right? There's El FARC and then Ejército de Liberación Nacional, ELN, right? And they're nasty groups. So I took a deep dive into kind of how they work, and especially from a guerrilla warfare perspective. Anyways, long or the short, get down there. I ended up spending 3.5 years and living in Cartagena, Colombia. Beautiful, beautiful city. But I worked all throughout the eastern seaboard of Colombia, right? So Barranquilla, Santa Marta, Rodadero, a bunch of different places. And it was an incredible experience, man. I mean, to be a young man living in another country, doing that kind of work, meeting the kind of people that I had the chance to meet, it was really, really unique for me, right? And it also presented some of life's biggest adversities for me as an adult, right? And how I don't have a family there, right? It's just me. I've got people I work with, but it's not the same. I don't have my tribe. I don't have my crew, right?
Yeah.
So that was, as a young adult, that really equipped me with a different level of understanding of truly what I'm capable of doing, right? And so it's kind of like that, you know, being forged in fire, like throw yourself in the fire, right? And so, man, at 22, 23, I hopped on a plane and went down there and started rocking and doing my thing down there, right? So, did that, got tired of doing it after about 3.5 years, came back home. I took a year off. I needed to just cool out. Like, man, I was pretty amped up at that time. And I decided I wanted to go back to school and get my doctorate degree. So one of the really interesting experiences that I had when I lived down there was the Colombian Policía Militar, the military police there. And it's not like military police that we think here, right? It's actually a law enforcement element, right, of the military.
Yeah.
They have a unit there called La Jungla. And La Jungla is basically, it means jungle, right? Jungle unit. They're primarily responsible for going after cocoa fields, right? And burning them down, right? And so that anything having to do with any sort of domestic warfare and going and combating guerrillas and narcotraficantes and all that sort of a thing, that's on them. And I mean, and those guys, they're really good at what they do. Like, they're really, really good. But I befriended a few of them, right? And I had a chance to meet some of them and talk with them and create really interesting relationships with them. But I'll never forget, man, one night I'm at a bar, because that's what you do when you know, you're there, you drink all the time, right? So I'm at a bar and I'm talking to a captain. And I asked him, I'm like, man, how is that you guys maintain the positive attitude? Like, because it's different, right? Like, if I go to Afghanistan, I'm deployed, right, for 8 to 12 months. I'm dislocated from my family, and I just have my guys to depend on. So after a while, burnout is a very real thing. These guys, I never, ever saw any of them. Like, they're always laughing, smiling. Like, when it's time to clock in and go to work, they're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
But once they punch out, they're chilling. I'm like, with the operational tempo that they keep, I couldn't understand. And he told me, he goes, it's a very simple thing. For us, it's a religious experience. It's a spiritual thing. You guys look at things very clinically, right? So like this person goes and they experience XYZ trauma. They come back and they're constantly playing that trauma over and over and trying to make sense of it. We don't do that. How we deal with that is, you know what? This is what I was called to do. At the end of the day, whether it's men that I've killed or men that I've lost, every single week, when I step into church and I go to confession, I am absolved. And I walk out the next day or that same day, and I'm good to go. Right? So I don't even try to begin to make sense of any of that. I just give it up to him. And they call it demonios de guerra, right? So what we call PTSD here, they call demons of war there, right? And so it's a very much a spiritual thing. And you know, brother, for whatever reason, it blew my mind. Like it blew my mind. Wow, man, like it's fascinating. So that sparked an interest for me to wanting to study the brain and how is it the brain deals with stress and trauma and it's combative trauma specifically. So that's what I devoted my doctorate degree to, right? So after I took that year off of just kind of recalibrating, getting realigned, I applied for the doctorate program at USF and met an incredible advisor there, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Daniel Lendy. And for 7 years, I mean, he was my guy, and he guided me through the entire process. And I took a really deep dive, man, into how it is that one can achieve resiliency in the face of adversity, combative stress, what happens neurologically, what happens psychologically and emotionally, and what are methodologies that we can utilize to optimize people, right? So like, how do I truly make you the best and highest version of yourself? What does that look like? What does it take, right? And so that's what I focused on.
Wow. And I think like me as a coach, right, in training fighters and stuff like that, I think like, because a lot of people, they always see like, I'll make the fighters do certain things, right? And they being, quote unquote, physically challenged, but truly not. Like my purpose is to make him do certain physical things that's going to challenge them mentally, right? Because I think the brain is the key for you to overcome, for you to think and feel it, you know, and for your body to react and act accordingly, right? And because a lot of people think like, oh, I'm in great shape, but you can be in the greatest shape of your life. But if your mind is not there, if you don't have the strength, like the fortitude and the stamina, you know, like you're not going to be able to overcome certain moments.
Absolutely.
Right? Just like in life, like, you know, fighting, I always say that fighting is kind of like life, right? You got moments where things kind of like slow down a little bit. You still plug into the fight because you got an opponent right in front of you. But at the same time, you're kind of analyzing stuff. You're assessing, you know, the risks and how you're gonna attack and things like that. You know, and obviously there's going to be a response from the other person. But then there's also a time with the other moment where it's like there's a collision, right? And it's kind of like a sprint, right? So you got a marathon here where you're breathing, you know, you keeping a pace, and here it's just chaotic, right? So, but the brain controls everything, and you got to be. And the crazy thing is like you got to be able to shift gears, right? So you can collide. Gets chaotic and you can be in like fifth gear at that moment, and then you got to be able to downshift to like third gear per se.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of people because a lot of times once they get their mind racing, like it just continues racing even when they're here. You know, like their mind's still racing. So they start rushing the action and you know and trying to go from A to B without or A to Z without going through the process, right? From A to B to C.
Of course.
So they try to rush it, you know? And that's crazy. I think the brain, like, obviously dictates, you know, your actions, your reactions, you know, and the emotional part. I think that's a key right there.
So it's interesting, man, and it kind of going back to your analogy from a fighting perspective, right? So there's the macro and then there's the micro, and the micro is like when it's right in front of you and that chaos is happening. And I mean, bro, you've been a professional coach for umpteen years now, right? So like, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a big difference between your fighting skill and you're fighting intelligence.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the ability to foster that intelligence, which means that this thing knows when to go to third gear, fifth gear, first gear, when to pump the brake and hit neutral, right? So on and so forth. It's different. And it's different in the sense of you teaching someone how to throw a basic jab, cross, hook, or whatever it is, right? Like the timing of when and how to compose yourself to wait, go, right? Like that right there is a question of discipline. How do you actually implement discipline to control your emotions to where like, oh man, he clipped me. Oh, and then am I going to respond? Or am I like, okay, let me keep my hands up here. Let me move out. Let me angle this way. Boom, and counter, right? Whatever that looks like. But with all the guys that you have trained, right, I have to imagine that there is a challenge when it comes to being able to, not so much the skill part, right, but on the intelligence part, I would assume that's much more challenging for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, like, we were kind of having a little conversation about, like, the nurturing part, right?
Yeah.
From, like, families. They don't prepare their kids to spread their wings at some point and go out there and fend for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, parents get needy and they want their kids to kind of like always depend on them.
Absolutely.
And so what happens? They never train their kids to learn how to manage their emotions, right? Mm-hmm. And as they grow up, they react based on emotions because they don't know how to manage those emotions. They don't mature, right, emotionally.
Yes.
And there's such a reaction. So it happens in the fights.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, a lot of you'll see like soccer players or some other players, they'll go to concentration camps per se, right? So they'll just go. They'll be away from the family. They'll be in whatever secluded place.
Sure.
And they'll just stick to themselves, away from everybody else, away from the family.
Yep.
Because it's tough to be a warrior and to be a dad.
Absolutely.
To be a husband.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So, like I'm here feeding wolves.
Yeah.
Right? And then the wolf goes home and then now he's got to take care of the baby. I got to take care of the kids.
Yeah.
Now he's not a wolf anymore. Right? Now, and if you don't know how to flip that switch, it's very hard to go from a wolf to a pup.
Yep.
And go back to being a wolf again.
Absolutely.
So you want to kind of like, and I'm not saying like being aggressive. What I'm saying is mostly like having the mindset of a wolf, right? A wolf wakes up and he knows he got to go hunt at some point.
Yeah.
Right. But he's always a wolf.
Of course.
Like like he takes up like their pups and protects them, but at the same time, like he's like, all right, time to go hunt.
Right.
And when they go hunt, they go hunt.
Yeah.
Like, they're not thinking like, oh, that animal might kill me. They going hunting.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it gets very, very challenging when it comes to the emotional part. Because I think a lot of fighters, and not just fighters, but I think athletes or professionals, but I think like a lot of times for the people to really that make it far, there's something inside this is not right, especially being a fighter. Like who says like I want to be a fighter? Like I want to go in there and get punched in the face. I want to get kicked. I want to get taken down. I want to do, what I mean? Like it's so. And I'm not saying that you're off. You just wired differently.
So it's really interesting, right, that you mentioned that because you will see the same commonality amongst high-performing and high-achieving individuals in general, right? Now, subjecting oneself to physical pain and being okay with it, right, that's a little bit different of a variable.
Yeah.
Right? But the idea of the push, where does the push come from to make you want to go step in that fire over and over and over again? And you see the same type of trait in guys who are in the special operations community. You also see the same type of trait with folks who are very high-performing executives, right? Why is it that they're constantly on the hamster wheel? Going faster, faster, faster. It's never good enough. It's never good enough. I can do better, right? All that comes from deprivation. Somewhere along the line, there was emotional deprivation, and they are trying to refill that. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's a fact, right? There's no two ways about it. Everyone's journey, everyone's childhood, we all go through and we have established these mental models, right? How it is we see the world, what are the different perspectives, the different lenses that we have. But man, at the end of the day, if you don't question those mental models, for me to understand why I do what I do, and when I meditate, well, the 9 times out of 10 when I'm meditating, I'm reflecting on my childhood. And I want to be able to tap into, where did I pick up this habit? Where did I pick up this trait? Or why do I have such a compulsive reaction, right, to this thing? And why is it such a trigger for me? And to give yourself the opportunity to explore that, a lot of people think that it will create this instability, and it actually does the opposite. It solidifies you, because if you could understand the why behind why you're doing it, and then you can also go back and say, is that the most efficient and effective way of doing that? No, probably not. So what can I do to make it better? But it all goes back to the initial drive. What is the thing? What's that catalyst that is pushing me forward? I'll tell you, man, I work with a lot of executives throughout the country on human optimization. That's been a staple of mine that I've done. And man, there is a huge preponderance of them that are incredibly narcissistic, right? And they're self-absorbed, and it's me, and I'm going to do what I need to do. Well, when you look at why, right, there are elements and gaps within their upbringing and even in young adulthood that their cup wasn't filled emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, take your pick, right? And so having folks being able to realize that, that's an incredibly powerful tool, but not a lot of folks want to take that journey because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and obviously, like fighters, they gotta have an ego, right? They gotta have pride. But I always say, like, they gotta have a healthy ego and a healthy pride.
Absolutely.
And I hope that for most part they understand it, right? Because you gotta have an ego. Like, you can't see yourself as like being the last one.
No,
you
for
can't.
sure.
You know, you gotta see yourself as being the first, the best one.
Yes.
Right. And as a coach, it's the same thing. But it's got to be healthy, meaning, like, you know, I don't need to talk crap about other people. I don't need to, like, cast shade on someone else, you know,
right,
to make myself look better. Like, there has to be certain things in place. But I feel like if you don't take the healthy pride and belonging to a community, like the Navy SEALs do, like, you know, their group, they're proud of their group.
Yes.
And they'll go to war for the group.
Yes.
They'll die for the group.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't take the pride, if you lack that identity, like, I think that's when you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
And even because, look, to be honest with you, even combat sports are not. People always say, like, oh, basketball and this and other, like, team sports and combat has to do with being an individual sport. I feel like if you think like that and you feel like that, you're not going to make it far. Because you need to feel that you have a team, you belong to a team, and you're going in the cage with a team, right? You're going to be the one displaying the work. But
it's a representation.
You have to feel that you belong to a team. You belong to a community. And that's where you're going to go and represent in a sense, right? That you get it is going to make you feel good. That's the energy. That's the source of energy. And a lot of times, like, I feel like when people feel like, you know, no, me, in certain aspects, maybe someone that loves making money and things like that, they might make it very far. But when they turn around, all the people around them don't really care for that person. They're just using them.
Yep.
Right. But if you're trying to be a good, solid human being and just not be able to handle conversations in one aspect, but different aspects, right?
Of course.
I know people that's made a lot of money and they got beautiful houses and stuff like that, but trust me, they're only like one-sided individuals.
Of course.
Like, they only talk about one thing.
Yep.
And if you talk about all the topics, they have no freaking idea,
Absolutely.
right? So I always feel like you need to be connected. Like, for me, I see Tampa as my home. Every time we go out there, it's like Tampa. Like, for our team, the Death War team, like, I always feel like that's our community, our family.
Absolutely.
So, you know, so I always got to represent myself well because I'm representing them as well.
Absolutely.
You know, so I take pride in that. Like, I don't take pride on the banner and the logo on the flag. What I take pride in is the fact that the banner represents a community.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And that's what I look at. It's like, hey, you under that banner, you part of this family.
That's right.
So I got you.
Yeah.
You know, I got you.
Yeah.
So and I think that's what happens a lot of times. Like, people, you know, like wrestlers, they'll go out there and wrestle. Yeah, it might be an individual sport, but you depend on your whole team to, like, bring their best.
Absolutely.
To give 100%.
Yeah.
Right. So it's never an individual. A Navy SEAL, they have a team, but truly they're individuals. That's right. If you think about it, one has this task.
Yep.
The other one has that task.
Yep.
Right. Everyone, you see,
it's
like, within a team, you got individual tasks.
That's right.
Right. So in combat sports, it's the same thing. Everyone has a different task.
Yes.
Right?
You know, it's an incredible thing. And when you think about it on the human development side of things, right? Like, as a species, we got to where we are at, not by ourselves, right? We needed each other, right? And so this idea of community, it's the cliche thing, right? There's power in numbers. Yeah, like that's a very real thing, right? Like there's a saying that says 1 is none, 2 is 1, right? And this idea of, look, if you're out in a cave and it's back in the ice age and you want to go out there by yourself and face a saber-tooth tiger, knock yourself out. Let me know how that works out for you. But if you have 5 guys and all of them are carrying torches and spears, you got a chance, right? But that is an innate thing that's programmed in us. Like this idea of community, relatively speaking, human beings, we are frail mammals. Like you compare us to other mammals.
Absolutely.
We don't stand, like by ourselves, we don't stand a chance, right? But what separates us is this and the sense of community that we can bring people together to all have different tasks, to collaborate and serve a mutual purpose or an objective, right? And so, but the thing about it is, because we have the luxury of being able to have ego and have pride, because listen, at the end of the day, if I have the time to sit and think about how great I am or where I'm going to go and how wonderful it's going to be, that means I'm not worried about having to go and hunt food. I'm not worried about where money's coming in from. I'm not worried about this and worried about that because I have the time to sit there and be self-absorbed, right? That's a luxury, right? And unfortunately, in a first world country that's very well developed, you have a lot of that, right? And there's too much of it. Instead of being out there, and I'll tell you, man, I can go back to my time in Colombia. I mean, it's a third world country. The majority of folks don't have much. There is no middle class, right? It's either you got it or you don't. And there's way more that don't have it than those that do.
Yeah.
The happiest people, the kindest people that you would ever meet, right? And so you think about that and you're like, materialistically, they don't have what I have in the United States, but they don't need it, right? And so their ability to focus and put themselves into a mentality of, you know, what I care about is my community. I care about the viejito across the street. Let me go check on that person. Oh, no, I care about the single mom who's down here. Let me go check on her, make sure she's doing okay, right? Because we're all one, right? That is something that is missing quite a bit these days.
And that's the thing about like difference between the U.S. and other countries. Like a lot of like other countries, they have the homogenous society, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone, like they're all individuals, but at the same time, as a community, they have a purpose, a common purpose.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's why everyone looks out for one another.
Absolutely.
Like if you need some sugar, you go knock next door, here's the sugar. You know, you need some rice, whatever you need, everyone's trying to help you out.
Yep.
And you'll see it in certain places in the country, like especially if you go to New York City and you go to like heavy populated, let's say Hispanic community,
right?
Like that's how it used to be. I don't know how it is right now,
right?
But you know, we're lacking like the sense of community, and everyone is trying to like outdo everyone else, you know, and I got this, I got that, and I'm like, listen, I don't care if you're 6'7", if you're like, you know, this and that, whatever, you have this, you have that. Tell me about your brain.
That's
man.
right. That's
like,
exactly
you know, let's
right.
have a conversation.
Exactly.
Let's see if you can actually converse.
That's
right.
Exactly
Let's sit down and have a conversation. And they can't.
No.
You know, because they so occupied with looking a certain way or the superficial part. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
And they get needy.
That's
and
right.
They get even they start feeding a little bit of the envy and jealousy when they see other people, you know.
Absolutely.
And now don't get me wrong, it's great if you got a great physique because you're working out, you're putting in the work, that makes you above average.
Of course.
Right? But you can't be self-absorbed,
That's
right?
Exactly
you can't be in front of the mirror every day.
That's right.
And that's one thing that, you know, we lack is a community.
Yes.
And I try to instill that in the team. But it, like, you know, think about lions, the pride of lions.
Absolutely.
Is the pride of lions, right?
Right.
Hyenas, wolves.
Yes.
Like, they all have a community.
Absolutely.
Like, what animal do you... When a lion goes out there by himself, he dies.
That's exactly right.
He
dies.
That's
exactly right.
You know?
That's
and everyone here, like, those human beings, you know, like, I'm like, I don't need this self-made. I'm like, how are you self-made? Like, who drove you there? Who took you here? Right. Who gave you money where you didn't have the money?
That's right.
You know, who fed you? Like, how are you self-made? First of all, if you're self-made, that means that when you were born out of like nothing,
Exactly.
and grew up on your own and fed yourself and things like that, because obviously your parents had a play in this,
Of course.
right? So how are you self-made? Like,
well, that's a really interesting thing, right? And this is there's a concept in psychology. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so essentially, what it is, it's the pyramid, and the base of the pyramid, there's different levels to it, right? And the base level is what it is that you need to survive as a human being, right? And so it's safety, security, proper shelter, proper temperature, food, interactions with others, a sense of belonging, love, so on and so forth. But nowhere in that pyramid does it talk about dependency of somebody else, right? And so this is a critique that has gone around quite a bit of it. And it says this, it says, look, if I were to take a newborn, like straight out of mama's womb, right? And go put him in the forest, and there's no mom, there's no dad, there's no nobody, right? What's the likelihood in 72 hours that child's going to be alive? Forget it, right? It's not. So this idea of dependency on each other starts the moment you are born. Yeah, it starts the moment that you become a fetus, right? Because you don't survive unless mama's connected to you, right? So like it is ingrained in us. So this idea that we did all this by ourselves, come on now. Like it starts back to the beginning of your existence. You had to have someone else, right? And that never leaves us. But we get into this idea of being self-absorbed. We get into this idea of falling in love with ourselves, thinking that, oh, look at, well, I've done this and I've done that. The truth of the matter is, nobody cares. No one cares, right? What have you done to help other people? That's what people care about.
That's the key,
right
there.
I mean, and people that look for that validation off of, oh, I sold this or I built a company to that. And if you don't have honor, if you don't have pride, if you don't have that pride in your community and where you come from and pay homage to that, for me, all that means nothing. I don't care. Because as a human being, what's your worth? Yeah.
And it's crazy because you'll see it in martial arts, right? Like I've talked to the people at a very high level when it comes down to martial arts, and they can come from different backgrounds, right? But when you start talking to them, you'll find the same thing. Mindset, defense, offense, counters, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're doing jiu-jitsu now, there's footwork on jiu-jitsu.
Of course. Yeah.
There's footwork on wrestling. There's footwork in striking. Like keeping your elbows in.
Yeah.
All those little things. They're all very similar.
Yeah.
But you know that people are very insecure and they don't really understand martial arts. They're waiting for the John Wick to come out and do something and be like, look, he threw a taekwondo kick. Oh, he did a jiu-jitsu move. No, that was sambo. That's this and that. Yeah. I'm like, what do you mean, dude? I'm just watching the whole thing. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So it's just like one of those things, like, they need validation and they seek validation through through movies.
Absolutely.
Or someone doing something. Look, my guy just beat that guy, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, that guy just beat that guy. Mm-hmm. That guy doesn't even know you.
Absolutely.
Like, does he represent your art fully?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So it's pretty interesting, man. And so you get your PhD, right? And so you decide to go for neuroscience and stuff.
Yeah. So the discipline is what's called Neuro anthropology, right? So it's heavy neuroscience, and it's also infused with cultural medical anthropology, right? Which is essentially anthropology is the study of human beings, right? So how we operate culturally, and then also things that are going on in society from a medical perspective, right? So really tapping more into the clinical side of what's going on in the brain. So I got my PhD in that, and man, that process was intense, man. It was an intense thing. I mean, the coursework was challenging, but truly the research side, because that's the thing, man. You go through a doctorate program like that, you've got 3 to 4 years of intense coursework, right? Where you're doing classes on genetics and cultural profiling, and then human behavior, all kinds of stuff. And then you take your qualifying exams, right? Which basically say you've got the technical skills and knowledge to actually go and research something and contribute something to the field that is going to be beneficial and advance knowledge, right? And so that process of doing your qualitative exam, my qualitative exam was 1 week long. It was 3 questions, right? And I had to answer those 3 questions in 75 pages, right? Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality, what that is it's a literary review, right? It means that I have to go from the very beginning of the first documented knowledge pertaining to my field, Sophocles, Aristotle, and trace how everything developed, give a critique of it and a synopsis of it, leading to where it is that I want to take the field.
Oh, wow.
Right? So the amount of reading, I think in that time and preparation for it, in a condensed 3-week period and a week to actually do the exam, I read about 86, 87 books and had to put summaries and notate things.
Wait, how many books?
Yeah, about 87, 88, 86, so around there.
Holy crap.
Yeah, dude. And so anyways, man, so I go through, I do my research, go and collect data, right? And the process for collecting data for me was essentially what I focused in on is the influence and impact that jiu-jitsu and MMA has on guys who are combat veterans and what it does to the warrior ethos as they're trying to become civilians again, right? And so to utilize it as a tool to preserve them as a fighter and as a warrior, but just in a different context, in a different capacity. So it's a lot different, right? Like if I were to tell you, yeah, man, what was your average day at work like? Well, my average day at work was me getting dropped off in a helicopter, kicking a door in and shooting a bunch of bad guys in the face. Well, you go and talk to somebody who works a 9 to 5 in a cubicle, they're going to be like, okay. That's right. Versus, oh, what was your average day like? No, man, I went to the office and I went over to the gym, got a good sweat and good workout with the guys. Okay, that's a little more socially acceptable as a civilian, right? But what's happening in the gym is something very special, right? You absolutely are sharpening your sword as a warrior. It doesn't mean you have a gun in your hands. It doesn't mean you have explosives, but you're still in the same mentality, right? And you've got weapons, right, within your own body, and you become that weapon, right? But it's channeled into this idea of it's not about terminating the enemy, right? It's about making myself better. So now the fight is not this clandestine entity over here. The fight is within, right? And so I never lose that identity as a fighter and as a warrior. I'm just shape-shifting it a little bit, right? So that's what I took a really deep dive into, man, and got hardcore into the philosophy of Budo, right? Which is, the warrior spirit, the warrior way from a Japanese perspective. Did a lot of work with Shintoism. When you look at a lot of the traditional Japanese arts, a lot of it came, right, as far as the meditative and mindful practice on the Shinto side. And then looked at a myriad, not just the Japanese side, but the Chinese side as well, the Indonesian side as well, the Filipino side as well, right? But really took a dive in the context and pop culture. Look, man, post UFC, the first 3 or 4 UFCs, right? Jiu-jitsu became a thing, right? And they did a great job marketing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And I've had this conversation with so many people, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is at the end of the day, it's Kosen Judo, right? Mm-hmm. It is judo. It's just the newaza of judo, right? Yeah. But they pushed it really hard in a different direction. But man, you can't knock them, man. They did a great job of marketing it and having their own branding behind it. Yeah. But it got picked up by the military, right? And so the Army Combatives program, the Marine Corps Martial Art program, Jiu-Jitsu became a thing, right? And so I use that as a tool to say, okay, here's something that is forged in the warrior ethos that these guys have, that they're going to carry. They understand the basics, right, of mount and guard and side control. They learned all that in the military, basic Americana, basic rear naked choke. So now let's build on that, but they're taking it from the military and they're bringing it into the civilian world. How can we utilize that to where they're still holding on to their identity as a Marine or as a SEAL or as a Green Beret, and now just reapplying it, right? So the results were incredible, man. My hypothesis proved itself to be correct, right? Which is that particular medium works extremely well to helping guys self-regulate and modulate emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, because it's constantly pushing them in a direction of being better, but at the same time, you're getting served humble pie every single time you train. And you learn real quick, you ain't as bad as you think you are, right? And that's where it gets tricky, right? Because a lot of guys in the special operations community, the majority of them, very, very humble, right? But there is an element where there's some cockiness, right? No two ways about it, right? So there's no room for that in a gym. You get popped, right? Or you get submitted. Real recognizes real, right? Yeah. So I don't care what your background was. You're in my domain now, right? So things change. So it's a very, very effective tool. So long and the short, that's what I focused on. That's what my research was on. And man, coming out of that, I've been privileged to work very closely with U.S. Army Special Operations, going through and doing trainings for their guys, right, on mental resiliency, mental optimization, acculturation, reassimilation, that sort of a thing. I've done work with the Joint Special Operations University, which is an educational institution within the special operations community, working on this particular type of stuff, right? But at the end of the day, like to your point earlier, it's about our interaction, our community, each other, right? Which is what? It's relationships, right? And that is what spawned me into writing that right there.
Yeah, dude, I was reading your book, and let me tell you, man, it's insane. It's insane because, I mean, I like reading.
Yeah,
but
I know you're into reading, bro.
Yeah,
I know you are.
But when I was reading your book, I was like, dude, like if people picked up this book, they will absolutely grow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really pushes you to kind of like check yourself, you know, like really go into your spirit and be like, you know, if you truly want to grow and you embrace that book, it's such a great freaking tool, man. I was reading your book, and I was like, there's a lot of things that obviously I share with the fighters.
Yeah.
But you put it in words for me.
Yeah.
You know?
That's great, man.
So that's why when I was reading, I was like, dude, here it is. Here it is.
Yeah.
You know, I told all the guys that, you know, like, you know, I want them to read the book and things like that. I think it's important. You know, I think it's going to help them. Some are probably going to read it a little faster than others, because there's certain stuff that sometimes you got to read a couple times for them to get it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
But the book was freaking crazy, man. And what drove you to write the book? Like, what was it that inspired you to?
Bro, so you're not going to believe this, man. But for me, you know, a lot of people when they set out to write a book, it's New York Times bestseller, or they reach for the stars, right?
Yeah.
I started writing that book when I found out my wife was pregnant with our daughter, right? And for me, it was COVID had kind of just kicked off, right? And so I was home a lot, and I thought to myself, knowing the finality of life, knowing how precious this thing is, and I could be gone tomorrow. So the motivation was, if I were to leave this earth tomorrow, what is something that I could leave for my daughter? Not, you know, money or anything. What is something that I could give her that she will have with herself for the rest of her life that will help her and have a deeper understanding of herself and be able to improve her quality of life? That's why I wrote it.
That's such a like great guide for like emotional guide.
Absolutely.
You know, like when you start reading and you start breaking things down and you know, you start explaining to people, like, because you explain, like, you take the 7 layers right there and you explain for every layer. And I just love the way you break things down and you give some examples and stuff like that. And obviously, but not only that, but you also kind of like guide people to, like, you know, kind of like, so you don't just point at it, you analyze it, and at the same time you're giving someone a solution, right?
Absolutely.
Or an option, like, hey, if you go in this direction, your life is going to be a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what we all seek.
100%.
And that's why when I was reading it, I was like, I told my wife is like, all right, can I read it now? I was like, yeah. Just let me finish it, you know? But nah, dude, I was like, that the book is amazing. I mean, I've read a lot of books. I'm really big on Paulo Coelho, right? The Brazilian guy.
Oh my gosh,
like, he's got some like The Alchemist and stuff like that. He's got like some
classics,
books,
man. Classics.
And but so when something embraces me, like, dude, I was just reading. My wife was like, I was just like reading and reading. I was like, holy crap, this book is great, man.
Awesome,
it's like such a I wouldn't say like such a great spiritual reference, you know, and it'll guide you as well, you know. I mean, I recommend that to everyone out there. I told the guys that, you know, I want them to read it. I know my son wants to read it.
That's great.
My wife wants to read it, and they're going to be reading it, you know. So I was like,
it's interesting, man, because, you know, I will tell you, I wrote that book with the intention, outside of the motivating factor, just as a new father, the intention for it to be read once a year, every year, right? And I'll tell you, man, my first martial art instructor, this is some Mr. Miyagi stuff here, right? He who was my next door neighbor, right? And he actually bought his property from my parents, built his house on it, and lived directly across the street. Anyways, long and short, he was a former semi-professional fighter, right? And he was a Muay Thai guy, right? And so big 6'3", big old, I mean, like as a 12-year-old kid, I look up and I'm like, wow, man, this guy is Superman, right? But I had done judo. My parents had put me in judo, but I wanted to learn striking. Like I didn't know much about striking. So I'd watch him sometimes and I'd tell him I have this interest or whatever. And he's like, okay. So one day he goes, look, if you're serious, right, I'm going to see how committed and dedicated you are. I want you to come to my house every day and come water my bonsai in the backyard. He had a beautiful bonsai garden in his backyard. And it's Mr. Miyagi stuff legit. So legitimately, bro, for a year, he made me do that before he would start training me and start teaching me, right? But within that, he gave me a list of books. And one of the books that was on there was the Book of Five Rings by Musashi, right? And bro, that book I read once a year, every year. And I swear to you, in the past 25 years that I've been reading that book every year, I learn not just one, many new things every single time that I read it. And it's got nothing to do with the book. It's got to do with me and as I continuously grow. So that I wanted this book, it's not at the level of the Book of Five Rings, but I want it to have the same kind of impact. You know what I mean? Like to where people read, and as you grow, things are going to become more apparent to you, right? And they're going to become pivotal components in how it is that you relate to others, but more importantly, how you relate to yourself, right? And the understanding you have of yourself. That way you can have more control. And that's the biggest thing is self-control, right? How do you control those impulses? How do you control when you're going to go do something that may not be the most strategic? It may not be the smartest thing to do, but you feel like it's what you should do. That's how you get in some trouble.
Yeah, and,
right?
and absolutely, that's one of those books that you want to keep rereading. You know, it's like there's certain movies that you watch once and then you don't want to watch it again.
Right.
And then you got some of the other ones that you want to watch every so often.
Oh, no
and you
doubt.
don't care watching it, and you'll rewatch it like 100 times.
Yeah.
And and it's like you never watched it before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And absolutely with life experience and as you mature, you grow. You keep reading and then you keep learning. You see all the things that you didn't see before because you can understand it.
Yeah.
Right. But dude, it's amazing, dude. Like I say, when I was reading, I was like really. Like I really plugged into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this is amazing because and I like, how you set it up, how you break it down, like I was telling you, and where you take the reader, where you're taking the reader, but what got you to say okay, this I feel like these are the 7 layers that someone needs to have in their life, because to be honest with you, if you read the book, it's going to help you find purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly,
yeah.
It's gonna help you. It's gonna open up your eyes, your mind, and say if you really pay attention to it, you start finding your identity.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things. So not to dive in too deep, but the first layer, right? Mm-hmm. The first layer is you, right? It's the relationship that you have with yourself. So that really, you think about a pyramid, that's the base, right? But it's also the thing that's most neglected, right? So a lot of people can I need to be a better listener, or, I need to be able to articulate myself better. That's great, right? But at the end of the day, if the chassis, right, isn't where it needs to be, the car ain't going to function well, right? It'll pitter patter and kind of putt there, but it ain't going to be what it needs to be, right? And so for me, it was when you break down what it takes to be successful in a relationship, to build community, right? There's a rule that I have, and the rule is the 50% rule. It says 50% of every relationship that you have, you're responsible for, right? So that means if you're not bringing that 50% to that relationship, why do you have that relationship, right? And if you go to layer number 7, right, where I start having folks diagram every single relationship in their life, and now ask yourself why. Why is it that I relate to that person? Why are they a part of my tribe? Why are they a part of my community? If you don't understand that, or if you do understand it and it's just because I'm using them to get something out of them and it's not actually contributing to my purpose, and more importantly, I'm contributing to theirs, you got a problem, right? But man, that's how we operate as a society, right? You see it in sales gimmicks and all kinds of stuff. It's what can I get? What can I get? What about what you can give? Right? Because that's truly where the fulfillment comes into play, right? So when you talk about having your guys and your fighters, right, so be part of this thing that's bigger than themselves, but when it's go time, they're the ones out in the octagon. But when they're in the octagon, they're representing all of us, right? that is a symbiotic relationship, right? Where they're giving, you're giving, the rest of the team is giving, and it's represented at that one moment in time in that manifestation, right? So what led me, right, to have those specific 7 layers? It's very much an order of magnitude, right? What's most important, right? Because if you want to be successful and connecting with people to build up that tribe that actually matters, right, and has really, really good and strong meaning and a good foundation behind it, there's a very clear formula for it, right? And there are certain groups that exist that have done a very good job, right, at being able to maintain that formula. But it's not the masses. Most people have no clue what makes a good relationship.
Yeah.
No clue, right? But again, the most important one, man, it starts with yourself. You got to have that deeper understanding. You got to be willing to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. You got to be willing to lean into the curves, whatever life throws you. I had a dear friend of mine who was a clinical psychologist, and God rest his soul, he's no longer with us, but he told me something. I was probably 27, 28 years old. And he tells me, he goes, prepare yourself because life is going to forever be a roller coaster. The moment that you're up here, tomorrow you could be down here. And guess what? That's exactly how it's going to be until your time's over. And I don't care who you are. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. So what matters? Well, how well have you fastened that seatbelt? How comfortable are you with going up and down? You know what's going to happen. So get real comfortable. Look forward to it. Look forward to the peak, but also look forward to going back down knowing you're going to have to work yourself back up. If you don't look forward to it and you're just anticipating and building this anxiety on the down part, guess what? Sometimes you may not be able to get yourself back up. So if you consistently know that, look, there's going to be roadblocks, there's going to be bumps, and I just got to embrace them and say, that's part of the journey. It's only going to make me better, right?
Dude, I tell the fighters all the time, like, they need to get used to, like, being in the fire. I say, Absolutely. I tell you to embrace the challenge. Don't embrace the fire, embrace the challenge, but learn how to stay comfortable in the fire.
Yes.
You know? And I was like, because if you're trying to stay comfortable, like, you're not preparing yourself.
That's right.
You know, you're not preparing yourself mentally. Yep. You're not preparing yourself for what's next. Yep. And like you said, we're gonna have ups and downs, right? And sometimes we might see the Khabib or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Oh, like everybody thinks that he's here. Well, that's, as an athlete, he might be here, but we don't know what's going on in his personal life.
Right. That's exactly
right.
You
know,
100%.
So, dude, that's crazy. Like, that's and to be honest with you, I was just having a conversation with them last night, and I kept saying the same thing. Yeah. You know, I was like, you guys got to understand that, first of all, your identity is important. Understanding that you're part of a community. Right. This is not an individual sport. This is a team sport, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a team around you, you're not going to grow. Right. You're not going to get any better. You know, you need other people. You need the energy of other people. You know, obviously, you're going to be the one that's going to go in there and represent us. Yeah. Right. You're the chosen one. Right. But like for example, I'll tell you a little story, because, you know, like, part of my family is Chinese. Yeah. So I grew up doing martial arts. Yeah. And one time I'm sleeping, and my uncle comes over, wakes me up. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, come on, get ready. Just brush your teeth, wash your face, get some sweatpants on, whatever. I was like, okay. So I don't know. I think I was like 14, 15. Yeah. He's like, meet me outside. So I go outside and I see some of my friends. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah. You know? He's like, come on. So 2 cars come up. We get in the cars. He's like, yeah. I'm like, where are we going? He's like, don't worry about it. So we park right outside this freaking karate dojo, right? And he's like, you're gonna fight their best freaking student. I'm gonna fight their sensei, right? And I was like, what? He's like, you're representing the family, right? So there we go, back to identity. Like, I knew, like, when I was doing martial arts with my family, it was about my family. Of course. Right? My family. So I had to go out there and represent. At the time, there were no mats, there were no mouthpiece, there were no like cups and stuff like that. Yeah. It was like just the way you were, and you have to duke it out. Yeah. Right? And that's what happened, and I had to win. How old were you? I think it was like, I want to say 15. Young man. 50, yeah. I was like 15. And wow. And I tried to, like the mental part is so challenging, man. I was sharing this story last night with some of the guys at the gym, but my dad would sit on the couch, and open up a newspaper, and he'll have me on a horse stance. And I'll just be, and this conversation came up because someone sent me a video of like some kid in China doing it on a horse stance, like crying and stuff, but holding the horse stance. And he's like, oh, this is what they do in China, and here in the U.S. we doing makeup or whatever, right? And I said, dude, let me tell you, man, like, my dad would sit there, read the freaking newspaper, and I'd be on the horse stance, and I'd just be sweating and like wanting to cry. And I was just like, he's like, keep your back straight, keep your hands on your fists on the side. And I'm like, But you know what? It wasn't even the physical part; it was the mental part.
Absolutely,
it was the mental part, just to be able to overcome that, So, and it helped me, man, because as I was getting a little older, like when I was, I don't know, early. When I was like 20, I think I want to say, no, I'm lying. I think when I was like 19, I moved out. When I was 18, that's when I moved out. And then I was on my own. And then I had 2 jobs, but it got to a point I got burnt out because I was just working for 4 years straight. I was just like working day and night.
Yeah.
And so then I lost one job. Then I lost the other job. I quit the other job. I lost them because I quit. Now it wasn't even because I got fired.
Right.
And so I became homeless.
Yeah.
I was homeless, and I was like literally picking up pennies and like going to little Chinese restaurants up north and getting a styrofoam box full of fries and ketchup and stuff like that. Man. And people ask me like, oh man, what were you thinking? I was like, you don't even think, dude. You just keep on moving. You start thinking about
it. Dude.
Like you're freaking. You'll die if you start thinking about that. You just gotta keep moving forward and figure it out.
Absolutely.
But then maybe what I was doing as a kid, when I was on the horse stands, when I was like 5-6 years old and stuff like that, that's the stuff that helped me out when I went through a little stage in my life. Right. And I think like you say, like going back sometimes, and when you meditating and you thinking about your childhood, right? I've done a lot of that. Like there's a lot of things that like I had to overcome. Absolutely. Like my dad would tell me like he would talk to me, or he'll be scolding me for whatever reason. Yeah. And so I would just look at him, right? Because I'm listening. Yeah. And he's like, "What are you looking at? Don't look at me." So I put my head down. Right. And he'll just keep scolding me. And then he was like, "Look at me. Why are you not looking at me?" So I'm like, is it this or is it this? Like, which one is it? Right. So little things like that, man, they create certain challenges, like emotional challenges. Oh, absolutely. And so it's just like one of those things that eventually you have to overcome because, like, and that's the other part too. Like with my kids, we tried to be, my wife and I, we tried to be very, we let them have a voice, right? Back in the days, you didn't have a voice. Right. It was like what your parents told you to do, that's what you were going to do. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right? You were going to dress like this, you were going to go here, eat this, and stuff like that. Not, with our kids, we didn't do stuff like that. Why? Because when you grow up and you go into the real world and people are not your parents, they don't care. Absolutely. Right? And now you don't even know how to respond because you don't have a voice at home. Absolutely. So with our kids, we teach them to have a voice in a respectful manner, right? But they got to have a voice. That's exactly so when they go out there and someone's like, they have a voice. They know how to freaking voice something back. Absolutely. Right? And so that's why I think like your environment plays such a key role in everything that's going on. But at the same time, what's important as you grow up and you get older, it's important that you have a self-assessment, and kind of evaluate the little things that you probably had to overcome and a lot of those things, man, make you the person that you are, and you got to be thankful for that stuff,
So, it's interesting, man. Tell me if you've ever seen this before. So have you ever noticed that as people get older, right, and cyclically, right, throughout the life cycle, as they get closer to mortality, right, like 70s, 80s, right, there's always this sort of manifestation of behaviors that were very similar to their parents, right? Yes. A lot of things repeat themselves. Now, here's the crazy part about that. Say it's been 50 years, 60 years since their childhood, right? And now 50, 60 years later, you're going back to behaviors that you saw and you were experienced. And I say all that to say the mental models that are created at a very young age of what it's supposed to look like they carry subconsciously. We don't even know they're there. But what you're saying is exactly right. Being able to self-assess and question, what are the models that I'm displaying right now and why? And is it really the best way to go about it? Because it's very clear evidence that they stick. They stick because you look at the life course, and as you get to the end of it, you start doing stuff that your parents used to do. And it's like, and not even like, literally, but like idiosyncrasies, like little things that wouldn't be a big deal. Even, I notice it now. How I drink my coffee is the exact same way my father drinks his coffee, how my grandfather, it's the same thing. Now, in my mind, there's 50 different ways to drink coffee. Why do I pick that way? Why? Right? And so being able to put yourself in those situations, not just with something as simple as coffee, but how do I communicate? Right? How do I listen? Right? How do I interact? How do I show my love for those that I love? Right? And then how do I show appreciation and gratitude? Right? So all these things, man, it creates a manifestation. It creates this idea of what the world's supposed to be like and what I'm supposed to do in the world. But if I don't stop and force myself to question why, and then also who I am surrounding myself with, and that's the biggest thing too, right? Like, and you know this from a community perspective. Would you ever let someone into your fight camp, right, into your circle, right, that you knew was not worthy?
Man. All right, so we don't really have an open door for people just to walk in and train with us. But the reason why I have it like that, because for me, what's important is that they bring something to the table, right? So we can go back to what you're asking me, because I can teach a squirrel how to fight,
right?
Right. But I need to see certain things that you bring with you, right, which is like, and you don't have to be fully there, because obviously our team is going to help you fill in those voids or whatever, right? But I feel like you need to bring something to the table, like be respectful, be willing to listen, be willing to become part of a team, and even with the fighters that I train, like every month I pretty much send out a message. I'm like, listen, you don't want to be here, don't be here,
right?
Because my goal is to get rid of the negativity, right?
But see, that's it right there, right? So like, and all it takes is one bad apple. That's it, right? And it messes up, it disrupts the whole flow, right, of what's going on. I say that to say, each one of your fighters, they're grown adults, right? They have the ability to make their own choices, their own decisions. They can articulate themselves the way in which they see fit, right? But knowing that all it takes is one person to throw everybody off kilter when they can still think for themselves, think of the power of that, right? So the power of influence and who it is we choose to surround ourselves with, because, right, it doesn't matter. You and I talking right now, you are pouring energy into me. You're telling me things, and you're firing off synapses neurologically in my brain that otherwise would not have fired off today, right? And it's going to stick with me because there's a ripple effect there, and vice versa, right? So we take that and we live off of that back and forth with one another, right? And that's what makes community what it is. That's what makes a team, a tribe, what it is. So being selective about that is an incredibly important thing, right? And a lot of people, because of social media and all the other stuff that's surrounding us, it's a question of how many likes do I have? How many friends are following me? So it's a question of quantity, not quality. We have to get back to quality, right? Because you look at the amount of mental health issues that are plaguing this country right now, right? And most first world countries in general, it is due to this idea of being self-absorbed and narcissistic because of stuff like this, right? Technology constantly being in your face, which hinders your ability to have genuine and authentic relationships with others, but then most importantly, yourself, because you're always distracted. You never just stop. Stop and think and ask yourself why. Do that self-assessment, and then go through and do an inventory of your entire life and say, okay, so how is all this helping to get me where I want to be, and how is it aligned with my true purpose? And how is it being authentic or not? But how do you know what's being authentic or not if you don't even know where to begin with authenticity? Because we never, and that's the thing that gets me. And I wish there was a class that was at the high school level, right? That would challenge young minds to start asking these sorts of questions of themselves. Can you imagine had you've been exposed to this type of thinking, even if it absorbed or not, but just being exposed to it, right? When you're 11th, 12th grade, right, before you get ready to step out into the world and challenge people to be a little more philosophical, be a little more theoretical and strategic, right, and what it is that their place is in the world and the value that they bring to it.
Yeah, and not just follow the crowd.
Exactly.
Without asking.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
So like this past weekend, I had a couple cousins that came from out of town, and let me tell you, my wife, for example, like sometimes we'll be in some gatherings or whatever, and people just talking, and the conversation really has not a lot of content, right?
Yeah.
And so my wife, she's just look at her phone, you know, she'd be like, oh, whatever. But this weekend, when we were around my cousins, not once she pulled her phone out.
Wow.
There was so much content in the conversations that we were having that it was just like,
yes.
Because when if you expose her to us around if there's too many people with too much drama,
sure,
right, you're gonna lose her because she's not interested in that.
Of course.
So she's like, just whatever. Let me stay on my phone.
Right.
Keep me busy. Don't talk to me. Whatever. You know.
Right.
But this weekend there was so much content to the conversation. The energy, the ideas, the exchange.
Yeah.
Right. It was so rich.
Yes.
That not once she even looked at her phone.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And we were in different settings.
Yeah.
Like and all throughout. It was the same thing. Like she was so engaged in the conversation.
Yeah.
So and I'm telling you, I think like when we came back, we were all feeling like recharged.
Yeah.
You know, like it was pretty interesting. And absolutely, dude. That's why like I try to tell people like be careful of your surroundings. Mm-hmm. Be careful of the people you talk to. Like you said, one person can throw the whole thing off.
That's exactly right.
And that's why I would say like and I apply the same thing to my personal life as well. Mm-hmm. Whether it's family or friends or whoever.
Absolutely.
Like I once I gauge you, like what I do is like I this what I call I keep my distance, right?
Yeah.
So some people I like right here, some other people like 20 yards away. Some other people are like half a mile away.
Yep.
You know, another people's like a mile away. And I'm like, I love you, but from a mile away.
Absolutely.
You know? And yeah, we might be family or whatever, but stay a mile away.
That's exactly
right. Because I don't want the toxicity. I don't want the negativity. I don't want the drama. I don't want none of the stuff.
No doubt.
And that's how, like you say, you know, like that's why I try to be careful with the people that come into the team, because we're a small team. But at the same time, like, you know, trying to create that family culture.
Absolutely.
You know, and even here and there, we always gonna have like the fallacy, right?
Of course.
Which is like you're gonna have the one guy that feels a certain way, and then they want to bring everybody else into the conversation because they want those people to side with that person.
Of course,
right?
No, absolutely.
And then they want to come at you like, hey, this and that. But you always find out like the people that demand the most are the ones that give the less.
That's exactly right.
Or the least.
That's exactly right.
And I'm like, come on, man! Like I don't got time for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I'm very giving, and I know myself. My wife and I, we're very giving. You know, we can be great friends.
Right.
We can be like confidence. Like I know so many things about people, and I would never say it.
Right.
You know.
Of course.
And like they share that with me, and I keep it to myself to my grave.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And because if they entrusted me to you know with something personal, there's no reason for me to share with other people.
No doubt.
You know.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like I said, but at the same time, we got to be careful when we're giving, because we open up that door that sometimes it's hard to close.
Oh, right? Absolutely, man. You know, it's interesting. I think of like on a personal tip in my own life, right, where I have had relationships that meant, we're deep, right, and they ran deep, right, and man, that door left open, right, only to end up getting bit in the ass, right, and getting bit hard, right, and it shifts and changes your perception, right, of what that norm is supposed to be in a relationship. So it forces you to go, oh, no. You're not going to be 5 feet away from me. You're going to be 10 miles away from me. Yeah. Right. And it's not a bad thing. Right. Yeah. It's actually a very good thing. Right. Because if you know it's not conducive or productive, and at the end of the day, it's going to generate animosity or resentment or anger. Hey, dude, life's too short for all that. Right. Yeah. So look, you stay in your corner. I'll stay in mine.
And that's exactly what it comes down to. Like, you know, I just give you a certain distance, and I have no resentment. I have no negative energy towards you. Like, live your life, be happy. I'm happy for you.
Exactly.
But just stay over there.
Stay over there, right? No, and that's exactly right, man. And it's so true. Going back to something you said earlier, man, about your wife, right, with the phone and then not wanting to be around drama. And I mean, I totally appreciate that in such a big way. But, when I look at some of the things, right, just on a human behavior perspective that we are going through and have been going through societally. So if you look at technological advancements in the past 40 years, right, it's unprecedented, right? What we have done as a species, right, with technology is through the roof. Now, that's cool because like the idea I could pick up my phone right now and talk to someone in China like that, have a video call with them, right? I can send something via email and boom, they're going to get it. That's awesome. The challenge is that the hardwiring we have up in here is hundreds of thousands, not millions of years old, right? So when you look at that and you look at the amount of change that has happened in the stimuli in our environment over the past 40, 50 years, we're not equipped for it. We're not. That's why when you start looking at the amount of emotional turmoil and psychological turmoil that's going on in the world, especially in developed first world countries, it's because we are demanding stuff of this that it's just not wired to do, nor hormonally, right? We don't have enough production of neurohormones from a cortisol perspective, and epinephrine, norepinephrine, all these different things that help us deal with certain things. It's like this. One of your fighters comes to you and says, Coach, I want to train 3 times a day, 7 days a week for the next 3 months. What are you going to tell them?
No.
Exactly, right? Because you got to rest. You got to turn it off, right? That way you can recoup and get back in there and be the best version of yourself. Well, imagine. So I go to bed at night and I'm going and looking at social media. I get up first thing in the morning, grab my phone, looking at social media. Then throughout the day, looking at social media. And then you add that on top of all the negative news that gets shoved down our throats on a regular basis. It never stops, right? And that's a problem.
It makes you sick, man.
It does, dude. It makes you sick, right? So like when you look at that and you say, my brain literally is not designed to deal with all of this. We are horrible multitaskers, right? Yeah. As a species. Some people will say I'm great. No, you're not, right? Like you're not meant to do that. You may be able to juggle a couple things, but it's not sustainable. Yeah. Like you're designed to do something and focus on one thing and do it well. Society demands that we are all over the place, right? And that is noise. That's white noise. That doesn't allow us to focus and really dial into who we are because there's always something to do, right? No, there's not. You're just buying into it, right? And if you buy into it that way, you just become a victim of the entire system and the entire process, right? Instead of being able to take a step back and recognize, what is my authentic self? Like without all this crap around me, who am I really? And that right there is where the good stuff is, right? But a lot of people, man, they're scared to take that step, right? To be able to have that recognition and that self-realization. And I'll tell you, man, the martial art, in my opinion, martial arts is one of the best things people can do to reach and attain a deeper level of self-awareness and understanding, right? Because it is a physical, mental, social thing that you're doing that brings all these different pieces together, that teaches your body a skill set, that forces your mind to be strategic about how to stay calm under chaos, and at the same time giving you confidence that, listen, at the end of the day, I know what I can do. And as long as I know what I can do within and amongst people who are around me, I'm okay with that. Because the biggest threat that any of us has, I'm not worried about stepping out of the door and getting eaten by an alligator. I'm worried about another human being, right? And so when you know how to deal with another human being. And it's not just about the combat, but it's just more of having a voice. To your point earlier, you know how to use your voice. And you know at the end of the day, that voice is backed by skill, right? And there's power in that in a really big way. So, and I think unfortunately a lot of people give the arts not enough credit in that sense because there's such a push on the commercial side, right? Which I understand. But man, the essence of it, I mean, these arts were designed and spawned from warfare, like to keep you alive on the battlefield if you got into extreme close quarter combat. It is designed for war. So, when you look at the history, for example, like the warrior class in general, right? You go back to different tribes that used to exist. Brother, there was a big separation between normal society and warrior society, right? They did not mingle. There was 2 very different codes, 2 very different ways of life. And a lot of the times when you look at the texts and the manuals that exist of folks who were in the warrior class, my gosh, if they're not profound and meaningful, and not just about how to, wield a sword or do anything like that, but more of just life in general. Because when the finality of life is constantly in front of you every single day, death is knocking on your door every single day, right? Because of your profession and your calling, it forces you to look back at life and say, what really matters? What's truly important? And being able to, just like the samurai, right? Like everything they did, they strove for perfection. Whether it was folding a kimono, whether it was making tea, whether it was forging steel, whatever it was, they strive for perfection because they understood the finality of life. And if I'm gone tomorrow, the impact and imprint that I have, this is what I want to be a part of my legacy, right? We need more of that now today.
It's crazy to say that because just the other day I posted up where I was saying, like, if you're trying to achieve a goal, right, all you got to do is just give it 100% for a period of time. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to achieve a purpose, it's 24/7 from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep.
That's great, man. No, it is. That's that's
because
really good.
And that's how it is. It's how you lead your life.
Yeah.
But the problem is that a lot of times, like, people know more about other people than themselves.
Yes.
Because they always keeping an eye on everybody else, but they don't know how to break themselves down.
No
but
doubt.
They can break somebody else down.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Based on what they see.
That's exactly right.
So and it's crazy, and that's why it's such a waste of time. I think people put a little more energy into themselves and try to grow from that and overcome their psychological traumas, emotional traumas. We all have it. Most of us, like, even when family seems perfect, right? We're still dysfunctional.
That's exactly right.
And we need to learn from those things. I mean, think about your dad. Yeah. Think about your mom. Your mom came from, let's say, having lots to having nothing.
That's right.
Right? And then she had to, like, rebuild it in a sense. And then your dad came from a humble family. Yep. And, he knew what it was to go without.
That's exactly right.
Right? Especially in those times. City.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And then your parents obviously have done a great work of, like, learning how to balance those things. And, dude, it's like so much. Yeah, we're going to have you back, dude.
Oh, I'd love
to,
bro.
You got to keep coming around.
No, man. Whenever you want, bro. I love these conversations.
We'll keep talking about your book, because next time, maybe when you come around, maybe we can talk about, like, your strategy to write the book.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there that want to write a book. I want to write a book at some point. I think I want to leave a little print, for my kids, my family.
You got a lot of knowledge up there, bro. You should. No, like, for real, man. Like,
oh, man.
I'll tell you, that book right there, I had to do. There's 8 different editions of that book.
Oh,
right?
Wow!
But not that are available. Just in the writing process.
Yeah.
Where you should have seen my first manuscript. And my publisher looked at me and he goes, "I don't understand half the stuff that's in here. You've got to put it in terms, right? Because I wrote it at first very scientific, right?" Yeah. And he goes, "No." So 8 versions later, he finally comes back and he goes, "Okay, we have a version we can work with, right?" But bro, the challenge that it was for me, right? Like, to be able, and that's right, having coached for as long as you have and being an expert at what you do, the sign of an expert, right, is someone who can take something incredibly complex and put it into words and terminology that a kindergartner can understand, right? That's a skill set. Right?
And that's the key. That's why I like the book, because there are parts that people are gonna have to reread a couple times to get it, unless you're, like, used to reading, then you'll pick it up a lot faster. But it's simple, because there's some books out there, man, that you really got to have a dictionary next to you.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
No, absolutely.
And it gets a little too complicated. People start losing the want to read a book, right? Because it's just too complex,
right?
And I feel like right now, especially with what we're trying to do, Brandon and I, what we're trying to do is display the people in our community, right? That bring a lot to the table, that can bring something to our community and teach something.
Absolutely.
And when you write a book that eventually, is most people are able to read it, let's just say at a high school level, that's excellent, dude, because sometimes you don't have a lot of big readers out there. So you think about a book that's too complex, they're just going to put it to the side and never read it.
Absolutely.
So the simpler it gets, the better off they are.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because they'll be able to embrace it a lot faster. They'll stick to the lecture, to the reading, and not deviate from that.
Well, and it's interesting too, man. Like, for me, the big thing nowadays is Audible. So the books that you can listen to. And my publisher told me, he goes, we need to go ahead and do an Audible version. And I refused. I told him, I said, no, I didn't write it for that. Yeah. I want people, if you're going to put the time in, I promise you, it's going to help you grow. Right?
Yeah.
But you got to be willing to sit down and discipline yourself to actually be all in. Because most of us who do, and I've done the Audible thing. I'm driving, right, or I'm doing something and walking around the house. I'm not 100% dialed in, right?
No.
And so, from a marketing perspective, probably not the best move on my end, but I don't care. That's not why I wrote the book.
Yeah,
right?
you got a different purpose.
Exactly.
But for me, for example, I like hard books.
Yeah.
I tried the Audible
and
and I'll capture a lot of things, but there's a lot of things that they just go in and write out.
Exactly.
But when I have a book, because I'm a very visual person,
so
when I read something, especially when it's like a different word, like the fact that I'm able to see it, I'll remember it.
Absolutely.
And if I highlight something, it'll help me remember as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm doing the Audible, my wife is really good with the Audible. Maybe she's she learns through audio.
For sure.
But me, I'm very visual, and I feel like a lot of fighters are like very visual as well.
Absolutely.
Like the Audible, I don't know, man. I need to touch. I need to let's just say touch the words.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like I need to see the words and it'll stay in my head.
Without a doubt, man. No, without a doubt. But yeah, well, let's definitely we'll circle back. I'll walk you through the whole.
Absolutely, dude. We have to do it because I want people to learn more about the book.
Yeah.
Also, help us understand how you came to complete the book.
Yeah.
The steps that you took.
Of course.
Right. If you had any guidance and things like that, because I'm pretty sure there's people out there that love writing.
Yeah.
But they just they don't know how to put it together yet.
Absolutely. No, it's a process. It's
my
definitely
brother,
a process.
Thank you so much, man.
Dude, you're
Appreciate
so welcome,
you.
man. Absolutely,
Thank you.
bro.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.